Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take a look at the Sun's conjunction to Neptune at the last Anaretic degree of the sign of Pisces, followed by its immediate entrance into the sign of Aries, which is effectively the Spring Equinox in the Northern Hemisphere. But regardless of hemispheric distinctions, that zero Aries degree has always been thought of in astrology as a symbolic degree of great potency. And so we're going to talk about what this Sun Neptune conjunction might mean, given that it happens right at that important threshold, and also given that there are so many other transitions taking place across the sign of Pisces into Aries, including an upcoming solar eclipse, the entrance of Neptune from that last degree of Pisces into Aries. So I'll give you 5 things to watch for given the Sun's conjunction with Neptune that sort of follow that thread between Pisces and Aries that is so distinct this month. So that is our goal for today. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. Holy cow, we had a video that I thought I had a fun, provocative title about Saturn's death and rebirth in its synodic cycle, went viral, and we've had a whole bunch of new people join the channel. So welcome. Thank you for being here. If you like it, give it a little thumbs up, subscribe, helps the channel to grow. We're pretty close to 80,000 subscribers, which was our goal by the equinox. And I didn't think we were going to get there. We were at about 75. We're getting close to like 77 now as I'm recording this. So holy cow. Anyway, thank you all. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Where you can check out all of our readings and courses and cool offerings. I'm going to take you over there right now for a couple of brief promotions before we get into our content for the day. You go over to Nightlight and you click on events and you will see the live talks tab right there for our monthly webinars. April 3rd, I'm giving a talk on essential dignities. You can learn all about those categories of exaltation and fall, domicile and detriment. What do they mean? How are they used? What's the logic behind them? How do I interpret those kinds of placements in my chart? This will be a good crash course for people who understand that there is this language of dignities, but have no idea how it works. And maybe it even freaks you out sometimes. If you cannot attend that talk live, this will be sent to you as a recording. Then in May, June, and July, I'm giving a talk on Jupiter in Cancer, Uranus trine Pluto from Gemini to Aquarius, 2 major transits of our year ahead. We'll be taking a deep dive of a couple of hours into those transits. And then in July, I'm giving a talk on the 9th house. So you can check those out there, register for them. And then if you cannot attend the live webinars, you get the recording and you can watch it on your own time. Check out the speaker series. This weekend is the final of our speaker series on the 23rd with Drew Levanti, giving a free talk called Myth, Magic, and Magic in Ancient Astrology. Fantastic speakers, talented people who have come through our programs or are rising stars out there in the astrological community, giving free talks. This is all enabled by the Kickstarter campaign. So thank you for that. Check out the need-based astrology readings under the Book of Reading tab. If you want an affordable astrology reading that meets your budget, we have tiered pricing. So we have our course directors, our seasoned tutors from our programs, and talented graduates from our programs who are just getting started. It allows some flexible pricing and some good astrology for people out there. So we are very glad to make all of those affordable services available through the success of the Kickstarter campaign every year. Big part of our mission is to make sure that people are not priced out of astrology. The other thing that I want to turn you on to is most of you know Ashley, my wife, who is a clinical herbalist and works with plant spirit medicine. She is giving her annual Herbal Foundation apprenticeship course begins very soon. Go over to skyhouseherbs.com if you want to check it out. She's going to be on the channel this week, and we're going to be talking about a plant that you can pair with all of these Aries transits. We'll tell you a little bit about Roots and Spheres, which is a moon circle we host together, and some other cool stuff that she's up to. And we'll give you some planet and plant pairings to work with for the Aries season. So anyway, check that out. There's need-based tuition for her programs, just like there is for all of mine. Many people don't know this, but before maybe 2020, for about 10 years, we owned a yoga studio together, and our studio provided yoga, astrology, and herbs. So we're still doing the herbs and astrology. We just have separate channels, but all part of the same work that we do together. So anyway, I'll be glad for you guys to meet her too. Okay, enough of all of the announcements for today. Let's go over to the real-time clock and take a look at this transit. And let's look at the conjunction. So today is Tuesday, March 18th. We are getting out ahead of this by about a day because this transit will come through tomorrow. The sun will conjoin Neptune on March 19th. That is Wednesday. And my clock just shifted here, so let me readjust. There's the two planets coming together in the sky tomorrow, March 19th. And so that effect is, you can feel that now, the sun conjoining Neptune within 3 degrees. So you've been feeling that maybe even since Sunday. And then we see that immediately after the sun conjoins Neptune, by the 20th, it has crossed into the sign of Aries. In the Northern Hemisphere, that means it is spring equinox time. You're in fall equinox if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. But the symbolism is what matters. This is not an empirical causal system. This is a divinatory symbolic system, which means we take the heart of the symbolism of the solar year as it was seen from the Northern Hemisphere, and we translate that in terms of energetic signatures that are not literally linked to the seasons, but symbolically linked. So you can participate with this system no matter where you are at in the world. Now, all of that being said, the transition from this conjunction to Neptune into 0 Aries is a big deal because Neptune's about to make the exact same transition. If we take this forward just a little bit in time, we're going to see that by March 29th into the 30th, Neptune crosses over into 0 Aries as well. This happens, by the way, just one day on the 29th after a solar eclipse on the 29th occurs in the sign of Aries, at the same exact 9th degree that Mercury and Venus basically just turned retrograde at. So that if you have something at the 9th degree of Aries, holy cow, you have gotten quite a load of, you've gotten quite an emphasis in your chart on that, whatever planet exists at that 9th degree of Aries. Or if you have anything at around the, let's say the 7th through 12th degrees of a cardinal sign in your chart, major activation from these transits in the month of March. Now, I will be doing horoscopes later in the week for the Venus Cazimi. So one thing that I told you about yesterday in our weekly overview is if you back this up just a little bit, what we're seeing is that by Saturday, March 22nd, Venus will be at the heart of the sun. That Cazimi space is a pretty big deal. So we're going to do some horoscopes for that for all 12 signs by the end of the week. Ashley's also going to come on and we're going to talk about an herbal ally that you can pair with all of these Aries transits as well. So some really fun content lined up for you guys around that one. Today, let's talk about the sun and Neptune, given that the sun crossing Neptune will immediately enter that Aries point, which is where Neptune is heading shortly after as well. I'm going to give you 5 things to watch for that should be noticeable now in the process of this week, but also because we have a solar eclipse, because there's multiple retrogrades, multiple Cazimis in Aries, Neptune transitioning across the sign into the sign of Aries. This transition that I'm talking about could really be applied to all of the transits taking place across the end of Pisces and beginning of Aries in the next several weeks. What to speak of eclipse season, which is a window that opens that can last for several months at least. So I think that there's a way in which any of these things on my list today can be broadly applied for the rest of this month and for several months out. So think about it that way, because you may notice these in the next couple of days very acutely, but they will be like a little microcosm of the macrocosmic shift across the sign boundary that's happening overall. Number one, one of the most common things that happens when anything contacts Neptune is the process of dissolution. There's a wonderful hexagram in the I Ching called dispersing. And it's like the image, one of the images that comes up in a translation that I like is the image of a big block of ice breaking up into pieces and separating. Like you can imagine like an ice flow, and the big chunk like breaks up into parts and it separates and it disperses in different directions. Now, in that hexagram in the I Ching, which I believe is 59, does that sound right? Yeah, I think it's 59. Anyway, there's an instruction that's really interesting. And it talks about a lot of the I Ching, by the way, is an ancient Chinese oracular text that's also used for divinatory purposes. It's one of the oldest of Chinese classics. So it's a beautiful philosophical text, but also used as a diviner's manual, you could say. Anyway, that hexagram, it talks about a king, and it has a lot of advice in the I Ching for political rulers. And the king there's a picture of everything going so well in a kingdom, right? So everything's so happy, so it's victorious, and then everything disperses. And because something has reached a culmination point of happiness or satisfaction or fulfillment, and then everyone disperses afterward. But I like to imagine this, like one of the images that always pops up in my head when this hexagram comes up in a reading for me is the image of like when I go to a football game. I love going to football games. I go to several Vikings games every year. So if the team wins, then there's this big elated celebratory feeling at the end of the game, and then thousands of people are dispersing afterward out into the streets, or they're going off to maybe get a nightcap somewhere. They're going out to the bars, but everything's dispersing. The cars are leaving. Everything's dispersed. So there was a big congregation and gathering and a big celebratory victory, and then everything disperses. So that dispersion is then that the king is given this advice. When dispersion happens, because things have reached a place of fulfillment, that is the exact time at which you should make a pilgrimage to the ancestral temple to give thanks and to honor and to refocus the energies that are celebratory so that they don't get out of hand and so that they don't actually lead to total disintegration. Let me give you an example. There was something that happened recently. I think it was after the Super Bowl, where someone was climbing a lamppost in celebration of the Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl. If I'm getting this right, I think this was the story. And they fell and died. And I just thought, yeah, like that's in a sense, that's the little moral of the story that hexagram 59, the hexagram of dissolution, is pointing toward. It's like, when there's something so satisfying and fulfilling and then everything disperses, you run the risk of disintegration, of dissolution in the negative sense, where something that was strong and cohesive has completely fallen apart and disbanded or dissembled. And you lose the plot. And so the instruction to the king in that hexagram is go to your ancestral temple right at the point where the crowd is dispersing and everyone's happy, but kind of everything's losing its center. And immediately at that time, go to the ancestral temple. And then the people will follow you as a pilgrimage, and it will refocus everyone's energy and keep things together. So the hexagram is about the natural process of dispersion or disintegration, as well as the instruction to keep things centered and focused. Keep the main thing is to keep the main thing. And even in good times, even in times of great success or celebration, don't let everything fall apart. You know when it's most dangerous for me? When I am feeling best about myself in my workouts and it's the end of the week and I've got my rest day coming, that is the time when I am most tempted to just sort of ruin all of it by just slamming like 40 cookies. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So there's a thought here. Something reaches a place of culmination or excitement or fulfillment, but don't let everything disperse. Keep your center together, because otherwise, you run the risk of having to do an enormous amount of work to gather forces back together because you lost the plot when things were going well. That is one particular lesson that I think is very applicable for this conversation across the Pisces Aries axis. There is a sense of culmination that for some people might be resulting or showing up in a way where things are feeling really good. But that transition from Aries to Pisces can be about losing the plot and then having to do the difficult work of regathering your focus so that you can keep going without having to start over. So I know that's a kind of very specific way of thinking about it. But when you think about dissolution that leads to a new frontier, the last thing we want is for that to mean that we somehow just got carried away and let everything fall apart and dissolve, and then we had to start over somehow. That is a warning built into the transition across the Pisces-Aries axis. Things can disperse, and then there's this sense of having to regather and start over. The instruction to the king was, just at that point where you think things might disperse, go back to the center, go back to the ancestral temple, go back to the heart of your focus as a spiritual person. Even when things are good, I breathe in, I breathe out, I stay present, I keep the main thing the main thing. If I can handle good times without getting dispersed, then I'm really cooking. Because we all know the test of holding to a center when things are bad or difficult. I feel like we're sort of always doing that. But it can be especially challenging to hold things together when we feel really happy or elated or sort of manically optimistic and excited. Then things can disperse in ways that actually force us to have to start all over and build something up again because we let it go. So that's one thing to consider right now. But the other thing I would say is that broadly speaking, and I will, like, for example, let me back up for a second. For example, if you have kids, you know this energy. The kids they're having so much fun and it's reaching this peak. And you go, I'll look at my wife and I'll go, someone is about to fuck the other one up. Excuse my language. One of these kids is going to jack the other kid up because the energy is going up, 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 up. And they're having so much fun, but that comes right before someone runs into a wall or someone just throws a sucker punch at the other person. Oh my gosh. And then Tina Teardrop has to come out and we have to talk about big feelings. Okay, so point being that you want to be careful of letting things peak and then, the new beginning is made from chaos, right? So that's something to be careful of. But also just noting that whenever Sun and Neptune come together, it might just be that some things are ready to disperse and dissolve and end. And it's a sea change moment where that dissolution is not bad at all. It's just a letting go. It's a surrendering. It's a releasing of an old story. And then you hit Aries and it's a new frontier, time to start over. But is that dissolution, can we make that a healthy, conscious transition rather than it being a chaotic one that leads to this huge need for a heroic effort? Number 2, a longing, hope, or wish put into action. Look, when the Sun gets together with Neptune, we're talking about the planet that represented the realm of the archai, the Ade, the thoughts or shapes in the mind of God or the universe. These are archetypal images that present themselves to us, and we call them ambitions, dreams, longings, hopes, fantasies, wishes. These are the things that we aspire for. They're images cast in gold in the mind's eye that we say, this is what I want. This is what I aim myself toward or for. When the Sun comes into contact with Neptune, it's pretty profound the level to which our ideals can become just sort of supercharged. The ideal realm of the Sun, along with Neptune, makes this longing sometimes quite severe or intense and sort of highly emotional. The sense that I need or long or want for this thing, and I'm feeling dissatisfied, restless, I'm struggling to accept what is, in contrast to, let me get my focus back, in contrast to this, in contrast to this thing that I desire or that would fulfill me. So the dreaming, longing, hoping can also be dispersing. It can take us out of our center. And then again comes the threshold of Aries where we have to reestablish it. However, the other thing that can happen is the vision, the hope, the dream, the wish, the longing, the new archetypal image can be infused into the Sun by Neptune. Moving into Aries, we then say, how do I put this thing into action? What is the first step I take? How do I seed this new desire? So watch for that kind of sequence as well. Number 3 would be a powerful transition rooted in surrendering or letting go. The transition is marked, of course, by the threshold of Pisces moving into 0 Aries, which is inceptional, meaning that we start things in Aries. And then we look at the tendency of the Sun and Neptune to be about relinquishing, surrendering, letting go. If we do that brave, noble work of letting go of things, which is really hard for us to do, especially when the alternative may be an unknown, that can feel really risky. It's like, well, I'm not particularly happy with the way things are, but it's a known quantity. I know what I'm going to get and I can live with this. So maybe that's safer than letting go, surrendering, accepting the dissolution of something and starting something new where there's no guarantee of what will happen. Right. But sometimes you all know what this is like. Sometimes, no risk it, no biscuit, Where did that even come from? Oh God. So, is there a risk that's worth taking in a surrender or letting go that is, that is worth it right now? We have to look at that, be very discerning about it. But also just sometimes life just tells us it's time to let go of something. It's time to surrender. It's time to willingly say, thank you. You've served a role or a purpose, whether it's a person, place, theme, energy, and just let it flow on and then see what takes root in its place. Number 4 would be new ideals coming into focus. I mentioned this earlier as a longing or hope or wish put into action. Sometimes it takes a while to know how to act upon a new image or desire. I might say to myself, I want to write more or play my guitar more. I'm not sure how I'm going to find the time or space to do it or exactly what it's going to look like, but this is the first step, is just getting clear about the new image, the new idea, the new ideal. And that is a very Sun Neptune like experience where we just say, I'm not feeling totally, something is, I'm feeling a level of dissatisfaction, and now a clearer sense of what I do want or long for or wish for is coming through. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to act on it right away. Remember, we have an eclipse in Aries that has a several month window. We have Neptune entering Aries, Saturn entering Aries. Saturn and Neptune entering Aries will have a dialogue about what's real versus what is a dream or fantasy. What is the real dream that can be put into action versus the unrealistic things that have to be let go of. So that conversation is going to be ongoing for several years in the sign of Aries. So right now could be just a very small step in a longer process. In other words, you're just starting to get clear about a transition that you'd like to make, but you don't know how it's going to happen. Even that clarity can be so purifying, so healing. And then you just have to trust. I always tell people it's like trusting that an intention will take shape naturally, that you don't have to overcorrect and white knuckle the steering wheel, is like telling yourself, I can't remember the song lyric right now, but it will come to me. And then it does, doesn't it? The same way, if you just, all of us, if we have a clear sense of where we want to go, but we don't know how to get there, just say to yourself, it'll come to me later. And it does. It's incredible. Sometimes we block ourselves by feeling like we know something, we know what we want, or we're getting clearer on what we desire in some area of our life. But then we feel like we have to master and control the process. Whereas often the image is we're receiving a clarity, and we need to do the work of getting out of the way and trusting that the process and path will unfold. This is so much, by the way, of what the I Ching and the study of the Tao Te Ching is all about. There is a way that unfolds. It's more about listening and following than it is about controlling. This is why sometimes I tend to be a little skeptical about manifestation culture. I don't think there's anything wrong with having intentions or desires or visualizing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm just careful that we don't end up losing that felt sense of following something and letting something outside of us, kind of show us the way, as opposed to thinking that I have to focus on something and control the process. That is my only criticism of manifestation culture, is that if it tilts into too much control, lack of humility, a lack of the ability to, listen and receive adjustments and find alignment, rather than thinking that what we know or see or want or desire and the control of all the things is always a healthy way of going about it. Anyway, more on that another time, maybe. That's one of my little soapboxes. All right. Anyhow, last is death or transition of solar figures. How could I not mention it, right? You guys walk around now in your heads who listen to this channel with a little solar figure phrase in your head around any sun transit. So yeah, what we mean is leaders, CEOs, executives, presidents, kings, leaders, famous people, anything the sun represents that is famous or represents leadership can go through a transition or a death. Why? Because we're at a space that crosses over a threshold. The dissolution of one form of leadership followed by the establishment of another, or the a shift or transition of power or authority in the workplace, or how things are managed or organized. All of that can be signified by this kind of transition from the sun to Neptune, and then Neptune to its sun to its exaltation in Aries. Interesting to think about transitions of solar figures. Death, dissolution, sea changes around solar figures in general, with Saturn and Neptune coming up in the sign of Aries. There might be some really interesting drama around that in the collective. I'm going to speak more about that when we get closer to Saturn's entrance into Aries, because the Saturn is in its fall in the sign of Aries and has been associated with that classical dethroning of Kronos in ancient mythology. I'll say more about that. That'll be some fun stuff to look at down the road a little bit. Anyway, that's it for today. On my end, the video's been little tiny laggy, and Mercury's just about to turn retrograde as I'm making this. So I apologize if there's any problems with the video content today. As far as I can tell, it should translate well in the recording. But yeah, just know that there's been a little glitchiness on my end today with the recording, and hopefully it conveys well through Mercury stationing here. All right, that's what I have for you. I hope you're having a good day. We will see you again tomorrow. Bye, everyone.